And that in less than 4 hours from now?
The Enterprise will be destroyed, and somehow, although...
Hello, welcome to Star Trek Sodium. This week we have some facts from The Next Generation, Season 2, Episode 13, which is called Time Squared. In this episode, a Picard from the near future comes on board the Enterprise and presents a mystery to our soapy crew. Writer Maurice Hurley originally wanted Q to be behind this mystery, but Gene Roddenberry just wouldn't allow it. That's a shame. Did you look at Marina Citrus in this episode and think that something was a bit off? Eagle-eyed viewers would note that she's wearing shoes 6 sizes too big for her, and it's glaringly obvious. Dr. Pulaski actor had accidentally left her Star Trek boots at home, and so took Deanna Troy's Star Trek boots from the wardrobe department, only leaving a single pair of large boots, a pair that were used in a previous episode by extras. Not only were the large boots too large, they were also very loose, and you can see by the way that she walks that something is severely wrong. Paramount reportedly received a few letters from compassionate fans expressing their sadness that something might be wrong with the poor actress, but it was simply the big shoes. Everything would be fixed for the next episode though. If you look at William Riker, you'll notice that there's a startling difference between his appearance here and in the final episode of Season 1, The Neutral Zone. Just after Season 1 had aired, a man who had more than a passing resemblance to Riker was seen holding up a mini-mart in Rhode Island. The security camera footage was on the national news, and so to distance himself from the similar-looking depraved criminal, supposedly the Riker actor decided to grow a beard to give himself more of a unique look. That's why, if you compare what the actor looks like in Series 1 to what he looks like in Season 2, you'll notice that the difference is on his chin. It was around the time of Time Squared being in production that the great science fiction war of 1988 was really heating up. Things have been on a delicate balance between Star Trek and Short Circuit 2, but when the Short Circuit 2 people possibly went to a Red Sox baseball game and held a massive banner with the words Star Trek, Star Stupid up in the air, it really put the war between these science fiction giants into focus. Unfortunately, there's no lasting evidence of this banner, but people who were there either emitted a real mix of clapping and laughing, or they were booing at the large sign. One person who gave a big boo was Rick Burman, who allegedly clenched his fists at the news and rasped, "I'll get them for this, if it's the last thing I ever do."
There must be one, but it would never work.
What is it? What would never work?
During the filming of Time Squared, the studio next door to Star Trek Studio 9 was where Paramount recorded the weather forecast every 30 minutes for local news stations all across the state. Upon having a building risk assessment, the studio for the weather channels was found to be infested with yellow mold, so weather forecast production had to be stopped immediately while Paramount found a temporary space for the meteorological department. Luckily, they didn't need much space, and they fit in snugly in the space next to the Enterprise bridge in Studio 9. The actors of Star Trek were welcoming, but their patience was pushed to the limit when a loud weather forecast emitted from close by them every 30 minutes, and it would drive them mad. After 4 days of half-hourly interruptions, the Star Trek team finally managed to get back on track. A big fan of both motorbikes and horses, Patrick Stewart once shocked the other actors by repeatedly turning up to work riding a motorbike that had a horse's saddle attached under his British bum. Horses were of course his favourite, but as he wasn't allowed to ride one on the streets of LA because he didn't have the necessary licenses, he would strap a miniaturized version of a horse's saddle to his road hog and cruise to work, or with the comfort of a horse under his bum, but the wheels of a sweet hog on the road. Michael Dorn's girlfriend, Tina Turner, came to the studio to watch the episode being filmed, as she had more than a passing interest in Star Trek. She'd never seen an actual episode, but had read an exhaustive amount of Star Trek novels based on the original series, and wanted to see what the fuss was all about. There was one thing that she couldn't get her head around, though, and that was that the characters were different in The Next Generation from the ones that were in the original series books. Apparently, Tina Turner sat there for an hour in deep concentration and left in utter confusion. Did you notice during this episode that young Wesley Crusher interrupts Captain Picard in one scene, and in another scene he starts talking over Commander Riker? That's possibly because Will Wheaton's managing agent told him that he needed to be more assertive in his Star Trek role so that the character of Wesley doesn't slip into insignificance. His plan was that whenever Wesley is present in a scene, he would say his line before he was supposed to, and say it while somebody else was talking. As they didn't have time to reshoot the scenes, Rick Burman told the director to just continue, but after the episode was finished, Rick had a sit-down chat with Wheaton and probably told him to never do that again. Otherwise, he would make sure that the Wesley actor is blacklisted from Hollywood forever. The funeral of Florence Wall, the notable cosmetic chemist, was taking place at the time of Times Square's filming. Now, it's quite plausible that the extra traffic of the funeral contributed to one or more of the Star Trek production staff being late for filming that day. We can see, though, that the finished product of the episode is top-notch, so thankfully the funeral of Florence Wall didn't really have too much of an impact. Expectations with this episode were high, but Paramount couldn't believe their hensing eyes when the viewing figures came in for Europe. The numbers for UK and the numbers for Germany were about the same as usual, but it was the French that resonated with this episode like never before. Only months before, around 100 people were tuning in each week for Star Trek The Next Generation, but this week over 3 million French people tuned in to watch Times Squared. Some people suggest that the interest was generated by the main character of this episode, a Frenchman, Jean-Luc Picard, being embroiled in a mystery which was almost identical to a mystery that was happening in the French government at the time. At the time of this episode being filmed, the Great Recession of 1988 was going on due to the failings at Wall Street, and the American dollar had taken a real bashing. To counter their losses, Paramount invoked their anti-rise wage, whereby all of the actors were given an anti-rise. Not to be confused with a pay cut, though. Clever wording in their contracts had tricked the actors into being happy about changes in their pay, and Michael Dorn actor Worf was hit the hardest. Already only on a few $100s a month, Dorn had his anti-wage clause strip him of 50% of his pay for the rest of the season. Thanks for finding out these magnificent facts. Please subscribe unless you don't want to. If you already have, that's great. You can like it if you want, and if you didn't like it, that's great too. All the best, and I'll see you next time, hopefully for some more facts. Have a great weekend, and unless you don't or didn't, bye, ta-ta.